on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, I'm delighted to welcome fellow college tutor at Cambridge Marketing, Richard Levy. Now, Richard is a veteran marketer, over 20 years of marketing experience, both in permanent and fractional marketing. We'll come on to what that is. And we're going to discuss your marketing career. Yes, your marketing career. We're going to explain and share, I guess, a little bit of a mix of our journeys as to how we got to where we are today, whether you like the sound of it or not. It is a choice, and there are some opportunities out here. And we're also going to go on to the topic of, do marketers market themselves effectively? And does marketing need to be better at marketing? So welcome to the show, Richard.
Thanks, Neil. Lovely to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, this was kind of some time in the making, wasn't it? When we, you first kind of said, should we have a chat about kind of marketing careers and the various kind of essences of marketing? It just seemed like a really good idea, because I guess there's a lot of people right now in marketing. So they might be marketing within a small business or a big corporate, or doing digital, or, there's a whole host of different definitions of marketing. And I think a lot of them are kind of maybe going through a period of change or transition as this world kind of reinvents and reshapes its stuff. It feels like a really kind of pertinent time to really take stock of where you are in marketing, either as a junior or maybe as a seasoned kind of professional of many, many years. It just feels like a good time to consider your options, I guess, doesn't it?
I think marketing's in a really interesting place at the moment, because when I first started my marketing career, there wasn't the plethora of resources that we have now, but there probably also wasn't the complexity of what does marketing mean and what is it, and the different interpretations of it that there are today. So we're almost, to quote, living in the best of times and the worst of times. The best in times because I feel you have so much access to so much learnings and experiences and podcasts like this one, and other articles and features and training courses. And yet the complexity behind what marketing does as an industry seems to be more debated than ever before. So it's a really interesting paradox to some extent.
Do you think we're reinventing ourselves now? Obviously, we've got AI, metaverse, sustainability, all these new kind of an emerging themes, I guess you could call them. Some of them absolutely critical, sustainability, some of them exciting if you're into tech, AI, metaverse. Are we going to kind of see a different version, do you think, of marketing? Because to me, marketing over the last few years, I think, has been defined by most people as, I do a bit of social media, therefore I'm a marketer. Which I think you and I know is just a little slither of just the opportunity that marketing offers up. Do you think a lot of people have become, I guess, a bit misguided as to what marketing actually is?
Totally. If you look at what marketing is in my mind, it starts with that customer insight and the research and the diagnosis before you get onto anything tactical like that social media example you just gave. For me, unpopular opinion, but if you actually sort of break it down, that tactical side should be about 8% of the role. And let me explain how I get to that somewhat arbitrary number. Is that I think you've got three elements to it. You've got the diagnosis, what's going on in the market, where are we as a company, what are the opportunities, etc. Let's call that 33% of it, so a third of your job. The next 33% is the strategy. Who are we targeting? What's our position? Who are we not targeting? Who are we not going after, etc. And then the last bit is the tactics, but I'm going to put, which is another 33%. But I think you can then divide the tactics by 4, which gets to the 8%, which is something that marketers are not, I think, really considering, which is those 4 Ps, which I'm a big believer in. I know that they get a sort of mixed press, but how many marketeers do you know, Neil, are involved in pricing? How many are involved in product? How many are involved in the distribution element of it? And then finally, the cherry on the cake is the promotional element. But for me, unless you've taken yourself and the company on that journey, the promotional element may well not work because there's something else that's missing. So let's argue that you're targeting the wrong segment, for example. Let's argue that your positioning isn't correct. You can promote the how. Let's argue that the pricing isn't right, that the customer experience is awful, that you have problems in a distribution chain, meaning there's a delay in delivering your products, etc. All that is fine. And then you get the promotional bit, and that's the sort of sexy, jazzy bit that everyone likes doing. It won't work, I promise you, because somewhere down that train track, something else is broken. And my worry as marketeers is we seem to be a little bit obsessed by that last bit, that promotional bit, and not enough obsessed by under the iceberg, the bit you can't see, which is all that work that starts before it. And I think that's what gives us quite a bad name, and it makes us very tactical rather than strategic. But I think marketing is actually really strategic at heart.
So I'm going to add another little, I guess,
Mm,
point in there, which I'd be really interested in your take on this, Richard, which is the fact that I think it's actually 110%, not 100%. And bear with me on this one, because I think the 10% that isn't being done at the end of all of those things, well, it is being done in some places, but certainly not consistently, certainly from what I see. And actually, I might have fallen into this too, but I think as marketers, as an industry, we've become complacent and lazy and not done this
mm,
extra 10%, which is the measurement and the evaluation. I don't think we report back with solid data
mm,
and evidence well enough so that we can actually stand in front of a senior management team and say, look, here's the evidence of the true return on investment. We talk about followers, we talk about subscribers, we
mm,
talk about the generic kind of rubbishy vanity metrics numbers, and we don't get into real business numbers. And I think as an industry, we've failed over the last 15 to 20 years, and I think it's that long, by going those extra yards and saying, okay, this is the activity that we've done, be it product, be it pricing, be it promotion, like you say. And we then thought, okay, I'm now a marketer. Look at me, aren't I great? With actually out going that little step further and saying, right, now I've got to prove it. Now I've got to gather that data and that evidence, evaluate it, figure out what I could have done better next time. And I'm going to
mm,
present that. I'm going to say, look, we've done okay. And here's the evidence to show it. But
mm.
this is where I want us to go next. And I think we've been lazy and I think we've got away with it. What does Richard think of that contentious view?
I hate to say this, but I agree with you. I was hoping we would have a sort of debate where, I mean, maybe we'll come on to it where we can't agree, which is always much more fun. I entirely agree with you. You know, when people say to me, these are the amount of impressions, these are the amount of people, the likes, the reactions. Okay, that's good. But what difference does it make to either my top line or my bottom line? So either the revenue coming in or the profit at the end. But we've also been really lazy. Can I add another 5%? So we're on to 110%. Let's get to 115% because we have failed to realize two things, in my opinion, as an industry. One is that your best friend is the CFO. That CFO holds the keys to many things because often the CEO, second in command, officially or unofficially, is the CFO. And therefore, that relationship with the person who holds the purse strings is really essential. And what I say to many marketeers, anyone who's ever worked for me will be rolling their eyes, Neil, as they hear me repeat for the 58th time. Know your numbers. Learn the difference financially marketing is making. Be able to read a profit and loss, be able to read a cash flow statement, be able to read a balance sheet and understand it. Because that's where it's proving. 1,000 likes. Okay, great. X amount added to the bottom or top line, depending on what you're measuring, suddenly you're in the room and it's a serious conversation. So I agree. I wonder if I may ask you a question, just to come back to your point. I think we have become lazy in our measurement. Do you think that's because, as an industry, we're nervous of actually we're insecure ourselves about the value we're necessarily adding, and therefore we hide behind these vanity matrix because it makes us look good and it avoids us having to go there to talk about the financial element?
I think it could be that. I think we talk a different language typically. The number of times I've, as a marketer over the years, I've been like, can you translate that into English now? Because I really don't understand. You're talking marketing speak. My wife tells me it. My bosses in the past have told me this. Occasionally,
Mm,
clients will say it, actually, more than occasionally. People say it. So I talk marketing speak, and I know this. I'm being criticized for doing it. Fallen into that trap many, many times, hopefully not quite as many times in more recent years. But I know that as marketers, we speak our own language. And as you say, the CFO doesn't understand it. CFO doesn't give two hoots whether or not we've got X number of subscribers or, this, that, and the other that we kind of talk about. It's like, whatever, talk to me in my language. So I think we've become a little bit misguided. I think almost that we've been locked in this echo chamber of marketers. If you're connected with lots of marketers on LinkedIn, you're going to see marketing content. If you look at or read some of the marketing media, you're going to see, again, and as part of that echo chamber, people, like-minded people, talking the same story in the same language. I think you're absolutely right in terms of we need to kind of break out of that and look at things from a commercial perspective. Because after all, why are we here? We're here to help the business grow, survive, break into new markets, be more competitive, whatever it is. And I think by just going around that hamster wheel, doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, we're missing the trick of where the value is. So then, as you say, we automatically then become less confident because it's like, well, that's what I am as a
mm,
marketer. And we almost start to believe the narrative, which is so
mm,
limiting as to what we could do. We could be strategists. We could be
mm,
guiding and inspiring. We could be the go-to in the business. Wouldn't that be nice? We should have our
mm,
finger on the pulse. We should know what the
mm,
trends are that are coming. And
mm,
I'm not necessarily talking here. I want your take on this, Richard. I'm not necessarily talking as a senior marketer here. I'm talking about the most junior marketing assistant, because
mm,
if you're listening to this, you can do this too. This is not the preserve of the marketing director. We're talking about everybody who's got that word marketing somewhere within their job title or their job description. Because as a marketing assistant, you might be in your first role, you have still got in your armory, you've got the capability to listen to the market. You've got ChatGPT, Perplexity. You can do the research as well as
mm,
anybody. So just because you're in a junior role does not give you the right to say, oh, well, my boss didn't tell me I had to do it this
mm.
way or whatever. You can take the reins. And I think most of us have just failed to take the reins. I'm going to say it.
I agree. If I rewind my career back 20 odd years, I started off on the Santander, as they now are, graduate scheme. And the first 6 months, Neil, was spent in a branch. I was at Swiss Cottage, which, for those of you who know, is sort of northwest London. What you learn in those 6 months is so valuable because what you are seeing is real customers coming in, talking. You see the issues all around you. You understand the um, the frustrations they have and the joys they have. And marketing is the only department who truly should understand the voice of the customer and bring it into the business. No one else will do that. So finance won't do that, HR won't do that, whoever will not do that. So that is a marketing role. And so the importance also of getting out there into the market, whether you do ethnography, which is my favorite type of research, actually watching customers as they are, as it really happens, is so, so crucial because you are bringing that back into the business and saying, stop, this is what the market is telling us. So I entirely agree with you. again, a little bit disappointingly, we're going to have to find something to disagree on at some point, whereby the role of the marketer, whether you're the CMO or you started 2 weeks ago in your first role, get to know the market. Because if you can do that, you will have something unique to bring in. And oddly enough, I was listening to a very good podcast the other day. I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn, this post went round about Nike, Nike and how they had moved to a direct D2C model and moved away from a retail model. And one of the things they said they've lost out on is that when you're working on the internet, you place an order, you send the order, you lose that feel of the customer. You don't know. When you're in a retail store, you see why various things aren't selling, why other things are selling, where the demand's coming. That interaction with the customer is so valuable. And I would urge all of us to maximize that far more than we do, because that's definitely some of the value we can bring in, which nobody else in the business can do. So
Mm,
couldn't agree more. I think
mm,
also just on your point about the language, 2 points to make on that. One is that when you talk to senior people who aren't in marketing and you talk about all the stuff that we like to rabbit on about, like brand positioning and brand awareness and salience and the difference between salience and awareness and all this stuff, that you and I could spend 4 or 5 hours debating amongst ourselves. Everyone will nod at you, and then when you leave the room, everyone will go, "Okay, right." Move on to other things, right? So you have to your point, speak the language of the people you're talking to. Our language is like a unique thing, which I could talk to you about or talk to any marketeer about. But when you step out of that bubble, start speaking the language of the business. And I think it's a trick. I'm really guilty of it. That, you talk to CEOs and you go on about brand equity and brand awareness, and they're nodding away. I guarantee when I leave that room, they're thinking, what difference does this make to my business?
mm. And there's the key, isn't it? Really, I mean that is the big question. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Oh, I kind of agree with you guys, but I'm not liking what I hear because I
Mm,
like my version of marketing." Actually, there's the big fundamental question, and kind of we've sort of heard it and seen it enough times to know that this is the truth. What is the difference? Well, what difference is this making to my business? I think that is just such a profound question in its simplicity, but also its importance, because that is what people are thinking. Is that what difference
mm,
is this making? And of course, as you say, with the CFO, unless the CFO sees there's a return, so it's an actual
mm,
investment. There's no sort of magic dust here when we use this phrase return on investment. When you think of
mm,
a budget, it's not a cost, it's an investment. You see an investment giving you a return. You wouldn't invest in savings or shares or whatever and not expect to
mm,
see a return. That's why we call it investment. And I think, again, it's one of those things that, marketing budget, that's to spend. No, it's not. It's to
mm,
invest. And I think it's all these little nuances that have just kind of got us to where we are now. And I guess from sort of your sort of perspective as well, Richard, I mean, in your transition, because none of us have got as I would describe now, as a proper job. We kind of do our thing, don't we, with clients and this, that, and the other. What was the kind of, for you, the kind of the trigger to kind of move on from being employed and being in a more sort of
mm,
traditional working environment where you're part of a structure, you're kind of almost given the strategy, fait accompli, this is what you have to be
mm,
delivering against, you've got your job description, go do your job, you're going to get paid. You're in
mm,
something now where the skills and the experience you've got are being called upon in a different way.
mm.
Well, what is that like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, Number one, you leave a safety net behind, because every day now that I work with my clients is having to prove my value to that business every day. And you could argue, well, you can in the corporate world, and you kind of do, and I get that. But this seems to be more having to really add value commercially, to your point, and prove that. all the time. So I think that's interesting. What drove me to do it though was that I'd been in the corporate world for, as I say, sort of 20 odd years. And because I see marketing is so multifaceted, that if I was always in regional roles with a high dependency on other areas, which I liked. So I could work as part of a sort of big, wide team, but I never really felt like I owned that marketing process from cradle to grave. So maybe other people would be involved in the positioning side, other people would be involved in the targeting, other people would be involved in the pricing side or the distribution side. And there is a temptation, I think, in the corporate world where people have a lane and that's what you do. And, you know, do it well, but that's your role. What I have found since I've gone into more of a consultancy, fractional, call it advisory role, call it what you will, is that I get much more involved across the whole aspect of the business. And because I'm from the outside, I'm not looking to take anyone's role. I'm not looking to tell people what they could be do better. You know, my only vested interest is for my client, because if my client succeeds, I genuinely succeed and I go on to sort of bigger and better things with them. I found that quite an interesting transition. So for one of the clients, also you have enormous variety. So, you know, I work with startups who genuinely we're working on the product proposition. We're looking at what competitors are doing. We're looking at how we market ourselves, but also the level of service we're providing. So real start off, no one's ever heard of this company because we haven't launched it yet, to other businesses that are established for quite a few decades, but maybe we need to reposition ourselves in the market. So you get this wonderful variety also across different industries. Traditionally, I worked in payments, financial services. Now I'm involved, still doing a bit of payments work, but also involved in employee benefits and HR and AI. So you get this very enormous variation, and the teaching at Cambridge, as you mentioned, this enormous variation where you're hoping those skills that you've built up over 20 odd years actually can help. And the other advantage of also feel I have is you have a network of people. So, for example, if you know, I work closely with people in finance, I work closely with people in HR because you've built up this network. So when you're doing, let's just say, a brand refresh, for me, that's as much to do with the culture of the business internally as it is to what you do externally. Those two things have to be married. But it takes you a long time to realize that. And then you can call on experts you know and say, hey, I'm involved in this project. What do you think? Etc. So it's been really interesting. But there, you know, as always, that's the upside. The downside, as you all know, Neil, is you're constantly looking for new business. You have one eye on the future. Um, you are your own. No one is doing anything for you. You're doing it. You know, I spent the weekend doing my VAT return for the business, etc. So there's also other aspects to it as well. But I'm in a way, someone said to me the other day who's in the finance world that they're fractional. They said, I wish I'd done this 20 years ago, but I didn't have the experience 20 years ago to do it. So you have to build up that experience to do it. I don't know, it's quite a long answer to your question, but I think it's a really sort of complex, in a good way, situation to be in. And you also have to be able to switch from industry to industry, sometimes within a matter of minutes, because you're literally doing one thing with your startup, and then 10 minutes later you're with a really mature business that's in a very different situation. So I don't know. I mean, how do you find it?
Yeah, I think is that I think that latter point there, I think is really interesting. It is that switching. I think if you're the kind of person who really embraces change and likes to
Mm,
be kind of moving in your head, in your thoughts, but also physically moving across different kind of challenges in different sectors and different audiences and back to different
mm,
customers again, then
mm,
certainly doing your own thing, I think, is really, really interesting because, yeah, there is never a dull moment. And if there's a dull moment while
mm,
you're asleep, it's literally as simple
mm,
as that. And then you're not going to survive. And it is very dog eat dog out there. I mean, it really is. There's a lot of people doing what we do. So we'll come on to the kind of differentiating and being better at marketing as a marketer in a moment, I think. But one of the things I was going to observe there was one of the things that you said was almost having to have many years experience to be able to do this. So I'm seeing, which is actually contradicting that, I'm seeing a lot of people who are, you and I might describe them as very kind of early career people actually going for it and actually doing it, because the whole idea now of having a portfolio career where maybe you're working part-time on a permanent basis for somebody, but
mm,
in the other half of the working hours that you've got, you're doing some freelancing, or maybe you've got a few retained clients and you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think there's more of a portfolio thing which allows you to
mm,
kind of enter into this whole doing it for myself a lot earlier, because back in the day, certainly when I started, you had to have 20 years under your belt before you even considered as a serious
mm,
contender. Whereas
mm,
I think now, because of lots of the, and you could argue AI is empowering this as well, but a lot of the tech that helps us as marketers in the tactical delivery of things means as long as I've got a few little systems, a few sort of tech bits behind me, I can actually do stuff at scale very quickly and look really and sound really professional, even with just a few years experience. And if I tap into something like Fiverr.com, where I can sort of,
mm.
be serving clients all over the world with, my little offer of my little specialism that I think I'm actually going to enjoy and I'm actually quite good at, I can do this with a year's experience, maybe even less than that. So do you think, are you seeing that your competitors now are potentially going to be quite a lot younger going forward?
Yeah, I wonder if that segment that you're talking about are, and it's a question, not a statement. I'd love your view on it. More on the tactical side, like the digital side, for example, where they're very good at tech and they've built up this digital network, and their whole life compared to how you and I grew up is far more digital based. So therefore they can go out and say, I'm a digital marketing specialist. I can move from company to company, which is fine. Whereas if I look at the strategic element of marketing, segmentation, the target and the position, mass marketing, not mass marketing, you know, distinctive assets, differentiation, all this kind of stuff, which is pretty the sort of strategic side. Do you need more experience to be able to do that, like you and I have got? But where you don't need the years of experience is to go into the digital side because it's evolving, it's changing, and you can be on top of it. So I wonder, again, question, not a statement, for your view, whether that's two different propositions. What I'm effectively saying, what you're effectively saying is I'll do the strategic side. And almost, Neil, when it comes to the tactical side, I can bring someone else in to help with that, maybe, because they're really experts in it. But my expertise is building marketing teams, looking at the strategy, getting results, measurement, effectiveness, all that kind of stuff. You need quite a lot of experience. The other bit, you don't need quite as much. Is that fair?
I think I don't know. It could be that it varies. That's not a really helpful answer, is it? But I think is if you're a specialist in a particular sector. So let's say you said about financial services. If you're in financial services and you see your career, it just resonates with you. You just love it as an industry, and you plan to stay in financial services. I think you could probably punch above your weight time wise and actually accelerate through because you know that industry. But of course, by definition, then you're restricted to that industry.
Mm,
I think
mm,
potentially, I think it would be very hard to cross over into a completely unrelated industry to the ones that you've known. Maybe you're in your third job as a marketer, and
mm,
then to go to a completely different industry and actually be able to talk with credibility. This is the thing. You could jump and you could try it, But to be able to go into a management team and say, right, I can stand up in front of this management team. I don't know anything about your industry at all, but I can bring some fresh new ideas that can enable you to be able to innovate, because you are a closed shop as an industry. You're all talking, you're all kind of incestuously recruiting each other. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's really in your industry, and it's now time for you to break out. And that's why I'm here. So I don't know anything about your industry, but that's an advantage. Then I think if you're a almost multidisciplinary marketer, a bit more strategic, but you've had all these different industry experiences, then I think you are going to be more fleet of foot, and you are going to be able to, come at this from here's a blank flip chart of paper. Right, let's start to plan some stuff, and I'm going to bring in lots of new ideas, and not all of them are going to work, but I've seen these work elsewhere when the similar challenge has arisen. So is there any reason why it wouldn't work here? And almost kind of challenging with those questions. I think that would be very hard to do confidently and with credibility if you hadn't kind of done it a number of times before. I'm not saying it would be impossible. Some people are very charismatic and very, very capable from a very early age. But I think there's just something that comes with the gravitas of having been there, seen it, done it. And I'm not just saying it because that's where I am now. I know I would have really struggled back in the day to do that. It took me 2 attempts to transition from being employed into doing my own business. First time it was because you talked about having the connections and the network. I didn't. I was possibly maybe ready. I don't know if I was quite ready. And I'd been doing marketing for a long, long time, but I didn't do it. And then I went back and I did another role for another 4 years until I felt, now I'm ready. And I used those 4 years to hopefully do a pretty good job, but also build my network, because that was the missing element. So I think they're kind of, there gets to a point where if you're going to do this style of marketing, that more strategic stuff, I think a little bit of credibility or some very specialist industry knowledge that you can then fast track through. To me, that would be a logical way of planning that through.
I agree with you. Do you feel that as marketeers, what's your experience of the sort of reputation marketeers have within the business world? I mean, do you think we're seen as strategic partners who can add value? Therefore, I'm going to bring someone in for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, however it may be, because I need that strategic input. Or do you think we're still seen as the end bit, that sort of promotional bit where I'm trying to desperately pull us back or position myself as actually I do the first bit, because I think that's really where, quite frankly, the money is made for the business. I go into businesses and say, my objective is to make you money. My objective is to increase your revenue or your profit. That's what you judge me on. Don't judge me on, do you like this campaign or don't you like that campaign? I'm here to add financial value. Do you feel businesses see marketing enough in that way that we are bringing in the financial results?
I'd love to say it's 80-20, and it shouldn't be. It should be 20-80, but I'd love to say it was 80-20. The 80% is that we're seen as the campaign colouring in team, the digital team. Oh, marketing. Yeah, you're the guys who look after social media. Well done, you.
Yeah.
And that 20% then is, no, we're here for a commercial reason. I don't think we're anywhere close to 20%, and it's a real shame. It's sacrilege, really, that we're not. I think it's probably closer to 5% in terms of the number of people who truly get it. The amount of times where I've had to, for my business, which has been going, how many years now? This is our 19th year that I've been doing this as a non-employed marketer. And I would say in that time, probably, north of 90% of the times where I've gone into pitch or gone into have those initial conversations, the person or people I've been talking to haven't got a clue what marketing really is. And I look in the mirror, I lay the blame partly at myself for that, but I also say, as an industry, we have so underplayed it. We really have. And this is not all gloom and doom. I think there's huge opportunities here,
Mm,
absolutely huge opportunities. And if we can sell the data, if we can sell that lifetime value, if you like, of those
yeah.
customer relationships, if we're listening to the customers of these clients, or if we're employed of our direct customers here, we've got an opportunity to turn this around. We really have. We've got all of the tools in the toolkit. We just haven't been doing it. And we've fallen into our own little trap of a making, which is that we enjoy doing social media because it's a bit of
Mm,
fun. And we can
mm,
kind of blind ourselves with this, that actually we're doing a good job. Whereas you and I know, and I think we've probably proven the point here, is that that is scratching the scratch on the surface of what marketing truly is. So I think it's, again, long-winded answer to your question, but I think it's a very, very small percentage of people who truly understand this. And I think that, and I would applaud you for going into your clients or your prospects with that attitude, because I think that's the message that collectively we need to be saying, is that you think you know marketing, but actually this is what marketing really is. And it is that
mm,
commercial added value thing. Don't worry about the thing and actually how we do it. Just look at what we actually deliver as outcomes, not outputs. The outputs is just social media posts, but the
mm,
outcomes is
mm,
actually where
mm,
this improves our knowledge of the customer. It improves the engagement. We're going to get better responses from our customers, which in turn leads to more repeat and engaged business. And ultimately, that is what this is about. So I think,
mm.
yeah, we can. We just aren't doing it en masse. So I'd love it if we could all kind of pull together to do it. Why do you think we haven't been marketing ourselves that well? I mean, this was the third of our three questions, wasn't it?
It was, and I have good news, right? I'm gonna make us all a little bit more cheery when I say this. I think it was because when I started 20 years ago, we had 6 graduates on that graduate scheme, one of whom was me. None of us had studied marketing. I'd studied business, other people had done English, other people had done geography. I can't remember what the other few had done, but you get the point, right? No one had studied marketing. Then suddenly you enter a role as, guess what, Richard? You're a marketeer. No formal training, that's just what you are. So what we now have is, so I think there's been, you wouldn't go to a doctor and say, I've got this problem. And the doctor said, I've learned everything as I've gone along. Okay. But trust me, Neil, I'm going to operate on you and it's all going to be okay. I would imagine that might make you slightly jittery, right? You go to an accountant and you say, "Can you do this?" And they go, "I didn't actually study any of this, but as I've gone along, I've picked up the basics, so let's have a go." You'd think a plumber comes to your house. You get my point, right? And then they're not trained in it. We now have enormously talented people who, your point earlier about LinkedIn, even if you just follow the right people on LinkedIn, or you listen to this podcast and other podcasts, or you read How Brands Grow. How many people have read How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp? Or you follow the likes of Ritson or Helen Edwards or whoever it may be. There is an enormous opportunity to learn out there, far more than there was 20 years ago. When we were doing stuff 20 years ago, you'll remember this. You put a little code on the bottom of each advert, and you said, when you ring up, please quote WD1. And then when someone quoted WD1, you'd have a little spreadsheet and say, oh, first response WD1, right? And then you'd hope people quoted it, and that's how you'd measure it. We now have really, really good marketeers out there, courses that you don't even have to pay for most of it. Just follow the right people, and I think you can train yourself to be a really, really, really good marketeer. Now, that then comes down to the second bit, which is how much do you really want it? And, we've just had the Olympics, and I'm trying to think. Oh, no, it wasn't Olympian thing. I was listening to a podcast with Jimmy Carr, the comedian, and he was saying everybody wants to stand up in front of 5,000 people and be the comedian. What they don't want to do is the 20 years of work that it's taken me day after day after day after day to get to be able to do this. So I have the good news, which is if you want to be a really, really top marketeer, everything is out there at your disposal. I promise you. follow the right people, learn from the right people, read the articles, listen to the podcast. I was listening to a podcast this morning about, do you remember the Sainsbury's campaign? When Sainsbury's said we have to increase sales by, say, 3 billion, and they broke it down that it meant it was £1.47 extra per customer per shop, and that became very achievable, and how they did that. And I just thought, this was 45 minutes in the car of the most beautiful learning for me as I sat there, and I thought, wow, I've taken so many lessons from this. So we can now do so much better marketing training to become better marketeers where we haven't had that opportunity in the past. But what it does need is people to grasp that. And if they don't, then I'm sorry, we're always going to be stuck in this box of being, you're the comms department. But if we want to become commercial partners that make money, you have to educate yourself. But you can now. So
Mm.
it's a harsh
Yeah.
lesson, but you've got to put in the hours. And if you put in the hours and you learn and you follow and you listen and you read and you debate, it's the most
Mm.
brilliant subject, in my view, you can ever do, right? Marketing. It is so interesting about human behavior, the science, the creative element of it, everything else. But you've got to put the work in and you've got to follow the right people and listen. I don't know, would you agree? And you've got to listen to this
Mm.
podcast, obviously, now.
Obviously, yes, of course. But I think, yeah, there's a key point, isn't it? It's about being curious, constantly curious, is asking the
Yeah.
question why. Simon Sinek always says start with why. But I think,
Mm,
we're kind of, yeah, that it really is the big opportunity. There's nobody better placed than us as marketers to be asking the question why, challenging everything, not in a challenging negative way, but just challenging to come on, let's go deeper. Let's find out what
mm,
is the evidence. What are we seeing? Where are the trends? Where's the opportunity? What do we
mm,
want to do next? Those
mm,
that sort of innate curiosity. And I think, I would certainly agree with you that the best marketers out there, and let's face it, if you're listening to this and you think I want to be one of those best marketers, it isn't rocket science. This is actually what we're
mm,
talking about. Is very, very simple. Yes, getting into the
mm,
fine detail does get a little bit more scientific and complicated, but at the highest level, it's very, very simple. You need to actively listen and then act on what you see and act on the priority things that are going to help you and your organization. It is really quite straightforward, but so few of us actually do it on a consistent basis. And by surrounding yourself, as you say, with like-minded others, with good education, good feeds of things, you'll always be keeping your finger on the pulse. And let's face it, that all of us are doing this, no matter whether we've been in marketing for 2 years, 20
mm,
years, 30 years, it makes no difference. We all are in this emerging environment. So we're all having to keep close to this. This is not that, because Richard and Neil have been doing marketing forever, it means that they know
mm,
everything. No, every day it changes. And I think that is, for me, that's the beauty that I would certainly agree with you. That's the beauty of marketing, is it is this ever-changing environment that makes you feel like you're starting out every single day in a good way. You can rely on the
yeah,
things you've seen, but actually build on it with the new stuff. I just think it's, this is the most exciting time. It's almost perfect storm. I find myself saying
yeah.
that at the moment with everything that's emerging. Do you feel that too?
I do, and I listen to. I agree with you, and I hear different people's points of view, and I think, gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way, or that's an interesting way. And sometimes you can have really good people having different views. And I was saying to some of the people that I was with this week, there's no wrong or right here. Just hold a view, educate yourself, and hold a view, because you're going to get Byron Sharp at one end thinking A, and Ritson, let's say, at the other end thinking B, and both arguing their case. There's no wrong or right. I certainly would never say one of them is incorrect. And then you form your own view that is sort of somewhere in the middle of that, which is really interesting. To your point, we're not saving lives here, right? We're not. This is not incredible complexity, but it is changing and it is evolving. And I think you used a great word there, curiosity. Have the curiosity to listen, have the curiosity to debate, to chat, to argue points out, to come up with your own view, to look at the strategic side, to look at how some businesses have done really well and how they continue to evolve and they change with the times. Other businesses don't. And you could sit there 24/7 if you wanted to, taking all this in, and this is the great opportunity. But that individual, including you and I, always needs to keep that curiosity, because to your point, things change every day. There's different things that work. And also, if you read the business section of newspapers, maybe on weekends, it's always a bit more general. Neil, so much of it is marketing related without saying the word marketing. You listen to John Lewis at the moment. They're changing the chair, and they're going back to never knowingly undersold, and so they're going back to their marketing roots. Then no one writes that article and writes above it marketing article. But if you have the curiosity to read it, you think that's marketing, that's marketing, that's marketing. Well, that's marketing as well. So many of the problems these businesses are facing, we should be the experts in. So the opportunity just is out there. And that, I totally agree with you. It's the most exciting of times, and we just got to grasp it. And we can hopefully move that 5% strategy, if your number is correct, to 10, 15, 20%, 30%. The opportunity is there. We've just got to want it.
I'm sure there'll be people listening to this who are thinking, I need to connect to Richard, because if I connect to Richard, one, he's going to be feeding me with lots of really interesting stuff. And I like the way he kind of talks about this. But they also might be looking to get some guidance with that strategic bit at the front end, because they might have been doing a lot of tactical stuff and just be feeling, I just need to be able to see the wood from the trees, just to kind of get things in an order, and I can't really kind of understand quite how to do that. If somebody wants to connect with you, how best to do that, Richard?
Thank you for that. There's two ways. I do have a website, sopheramarketing.co.uk. So I'll just spell it out because it's not the easiest one. So it's SOPHERA marketing.co.uk. You'll see me on there. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. I will always respond to messages. I'm always happy to have chats with people, as you say, to discuss ideas, to talk about business problems. I'm someone always really happy to do that. So if anybody wants to reach out, send me a message, and happily get in touch. Or if there's businesses listening to this who think we could do with someone like Richard coming in, then again, the door's always open. So always happy to connect to like-minded people.
Wonderful. Now, it's been a really great catch up, Richard. I think, we thought we might be a little bit more contentious between each other, but actually I think all we've done is just figure out, I think we're talking the truth, because if we can't argue against each other, it's like, well, this must be real then, if we're actually both seeing it from our own perspectives. So I take heart from that. Richard, thank you so much for your time today.
No, loved it. Thanks, Neil.